Hello and welcome to creating your first process map in Visio using a BPMN stencil. If you already have some background in process mapping, this may be too introductory for you today. We're really just going to be going over how to use Visio to download the stencil for yourself, the BPMN stencil, and then actually creating the very simple process map. I'm not going to be going through any advanced techniques, so I'm not going to go over exactly what all the shapes are. We're going to keep it very simple. If this doesn't meet your needs, you don't need to watch the rest of the video. Thanks so much for stopping by. Please keep in touch with the channel because we'll have more advanced videos coming out soon too. To get started with Visio, we've loaded up Visio 2013. You may be using a different version. The good news is that more or less the actual icons as well as the menus do look the same. In Visio 2013, to get started with our process map, we're going to go to File. From File, we're going to be selecting New. In New, we're going to either have the option to select one of these stencils that are already downloaded on our screen, or we could search for the templates online. Today I'm going to be looking for a BPMN template, so I'm going to actually search for that online, even though it was available on the screen. Did want to show just how quick it is to actually download it. If you do not have this option, I would encourage you to search Google to look for a Visio stencil for BPMN. After you've selected that stencil, you can see that in our left-hand navigation menu here, our shapes have loaded up, so we can see our BPMN basic shapes, and we can also see a blank page for us to use on the right side. For the first thing we're going to be doing today is just going over quickly what a process map is. You might have already seen it in some of the videos. If it's a repeat for you, that's great news, but we're going to still do a quick refresher. Process map itself is going to be focusing on from an operations perspective. So there are other types of process maps like workflows that'll look at systems, other types of customer journey maps that'll look at what your customer's actual process looks like. Whereas a process map is going to focus on your actual operations. In today's example, we're going to be using an actual movie theater, and in our movie theater, so I selected our text box at the top just to put a label here for us. I'm going to say for our movie theater, I'm interested in the process to sell a ticket to a customer. That's what I'm interested in. So I'm going to be looking at my actual cashier that's behind the counter at my movie theater and what their process is to sell that ticket. A customer journey map, for example, would demonstrate to us from our customer's perspective all the steps they needed to take in order to get to the movie theater and get their ticket and then perhaps back into their actual seating where they're going to be watching the movie. A workflow, another type of process map for us, may take a look at what the systems do. So what's going to happen, kind of the complexities behind the scenes. So when we select maybe the seat for a specific movie, it could be sold out. That's kind of what our movie workflow would look like, is looking into our systems to say, is it still available? From our process map perspective, we're going to be looking at those steps again that our cashier, that person behind the counter, is going to take to sell that ticket. Now that we've mapped out our start and our end point, so it's really going to be the process to sell that ticket to the customer and then hand it to them. So I know that from my start and from my end, these are going to be what I want to look at. And it's very important again too for us to take a look and map out ahead of time what the process is we're trying to show, because it can get really complicated for us if we don't do this. What I'm going to first start off by doing is selecting my start event shape. So my shapes navigation menu, I'm going to click and drag it over. I'm going to see that it's just been placed onto my page. If I wanted to join another shape, we're going to go through that in a moment. But while I have my shape selected, I can immediately start to type the name of it. So I said the first thing is going to be customer approaches cashier. That's my first step in here. If I want to now log my next step, so I actually start to track my next step, I can move my mouse cursor over it, look for these blue arrows and select the next shape. If I do not have those blue arrows, so you can see when I did use the blue arrow, it automatically put a connector line from us from the one shape to the other. But if I don't have it, I can click and drag my task shape over. And then when I click and drag my task shape over, you can see that there's those green lines and dashes that say it's centered in space correctly. I can drop my shape, and then I can select a connector from my insert ribbon here and then connect my two shapes together to indicate there's been some movement through it. So depending on the version of Visio you use, it may be a little bit different. what I'm going to do now is select when the customer approaches, because I'm looking at it from my operations perspective, and because this is a very simple process map today, we're not actually going to indicate that this is the cashier. We're just going to assume this is the cashier. What we're going to say is that, greet the customer, and we're going to say, ask what movie they want to see. So does that look right? It's actually not right. That was an intentional error here for us. So we have greet the customer, which is a step. That's a great step to have in there. It starts off with the verb, so it's our action here is greeting. But because we use that and inside of our task shape, that's really putting two steps inside of one process. So what we want to do is try to isolate them separately. So we're going to say greet the customer as one step, and then ask the customer what movie they want to see as the next step. And you might say, well, why does that really matter? Why? Who cares about that? Let's just save some space on the page. Let's put them all underneath the same task shape. Well, as you start to get more advanced in process mapping, it becomes really important, because when you start to look at cost savings or optimization of your processes, you want to be able to determine the steps in your process. If I had those underneath one step, what we might not be able to look at is, well, greeting the customer, we're spending about 10 seconds on it. We're asking them what movie they want to see. We're spending about 50 seconds. And we might not be able to isolate that, because if we added those two values and put it underneath one, we wouldn't know that asking the customer what movie they want to see is actually taking longer time. So it makes it easier for us as we investigate in the future for those optimizations, that we can now see, well, one step is taking longer than the other. I'm going to leave it at that at a high level for us today, but I did want to at least share from an analysis perspective, it's important to divide those two steps. So we have our customer approaches the cashier as our starting point. We have greeting the customer. We can ask them what movie they want to see. We're going to assume that they've now told us, because again, we're keeping this simple. We're not showing the steps of the customer. So that now that they've told us, we're going to say that we're going to print the ticket for the movie they requested. And then we're going to just hand them the ticket for the movie. And again, I'm just moving my mouse over here and selecting these items. So I can see here that I selected an intermediate event, which is the wrong shape. What I could do is right click on this intermediate event, go to the event type and select end. So now it's changed it to an end event. Or I could have again dragged it over from my shapes here and then created a connector for us. So now that I've selected my end event, I'm going to put a label here just saying, customer walks away. And there you have it. That's our very first process map, creating it in Visio. What we went over today was how to put your start shape, how to change your end shape as well, how to do some attachments between those tasks. And we talked about isolating the processes, so why it's important not to use and or combine multiple processes into a process map. That concludes our basic introduction today to creating the process map in Visio. I hope this was really helpful. If you like what you saw, please click like. If you didn't like what you saw, of course, you can click dislike. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much.